Hi there, I'm John Underhill, and this is the Red Special Guitar Podcast. Today is the first ever Red Special Guitar Podcast, and I'd like to welcome everyone who is listening to join me each month to talk about the legendary Red Special Guitar. For those of you that know me, you'll know that for the last 3 or 4 years I've been arranging the Red Special Guitar Meetup in the UK, and I've been welcoming people from all different backgrounds with all different views to meet up and talk about the Red Special Guitar and their experiences with it. So with COVID-19 upon us and unable to meet in person, I decided to put together the podcast. In each episode, I'll not only talk about the guitar on my own, but I'll also be talking to a guest or guests who've been inspired by the guitar in some way. From people who've built their own guitar, to people who build commercial copies, to people who've worked on the Red Special, and to people who work with Brian May himself. On this first episode, I'm going to be catching up with my friend Luke Holwerda from Phoenix, Arizona, who earlier this year hosted the first ever Red Special Meetup in the USA. Luke has spent several years building his own Red Special, which he documented on his YouTube channel. He's also a professional photographer, works on 2 podcasts, and earlier this year released a sci-fi horror movie globally on iTunes, reaching number 1 in several of the categories. To say Luke is a clever chap is an understatement, but he graciously took some time out of his busy schedule to talk to me for the first podcast. Hello, Luke Holwerda from Phoenix, Arizona. How are you?
Hello, hello, hello. I don't know if you actually want to start that way.
Can do. It's pretty much you. So welcome to the podcast, the Red Special Guitar Podcast, the first ever Red Special Guitar Podcast. How does that make you feel that you've been chosen?
It's amazing and it smells great.
Excellent. That really comes across in a podcast, so I'm glad you've mentioned it because I was thinking the same thing.
It's minty.
Minty, like the Red Special trem arm tip, which is actually grey. So I've given you a lovely gushing intro, Luke, telling everyone how wonderful you are and how much I hate you because you tend to be good at everything. But based on that, I wanted just to talk about how this year you arranged the first ever US Red Special Meetup in Phoenix, Arizona, and you arranged it just before the coronavirus pandemic.
Yes, I was very aware that it was coming on. No, it was just pure dumb luck. And the only thing we really planned was, for the people coming from abroad, I wanted it to be the most temperate possible Arizona experience. So I just happened to look at the calendar and thought, well, this is the last day before it gets up to about 100 degrees. Let's do it then. And it worked, yeah. And I was pretty surprised how many people came out because I've never been to one. I never knew that it existed until I saw yours, and I thought, damn, we need one over here. So I kind of put the feelers out, and I was basically asking if anyone else wanted to do it besides me, so that I could just go and enjoy it, and nobody else took the reins, so I said, well, guess it's down to me.
And you put it together, and as we said, if you build it, they will come, and they did, from all over the world.
They did. I mean, very surprised. I mean, you came from England, and Doug came from Scotland, and we had people from Nebraska and Tennessee and Georgia and California. One guy drove 18 hours or something to be here, and he brought about 20 guitars. It's pretty wild. And James Chen. Yeah, the one and only.
There is a video. Luke put together a video on YouTube for the Red Special Meetup in Phoenix from himself, from his own perspective, doing a treble booster demo, I think.
Yes. I mean, I hoped that it would have turned out a little nicer. I wanted to have a audio book, basically, of all the different treble boosters, and we managed to gather a pretty solid grouping of treble boosters. And actually, Greg Fryer in Australia sent me a bunch so that we had a few more. And I had big elaborate plans to film it with a couple cameras and had some of my film friends come out and film it. And we set up microphones, and very long story, the PA didn't work for us. So we basically lost all the sound, but we had the sound coming through the cameras. And so it's not amazing, but it's still, I think, a decent resource, but not as good as it could have been. But I had big plans.
Pretty good for a first attempt. So does that mean that as you didn't achieve what you wanted to, you're likely to arrange a second US meetup when you're
For
able
sure.
to?
Yeah. We have to demolish expectations next time. We have to kill all the flashing lights and get better.
I quite like the lights. I didn't at all. It gave me a headache for a week.
Well, yeah. For anyone who wasn't there, we had we set up in this restaurant bar, and they had just opened. So they had this stage at the back of the house, which they just let us run free and let us do anything we wanted. We had their PA, we had their lights, but they couldn't stop the automation on the lights, so everything was just spinning and strobing the whole day. And if we turned them off, we had no light. So we tried to live with it. Some people that at the meetup actually started figuring out how to turn off the motion. So we had some lights that weren't moving, but they were at least still blinking. So it's pretty fun.
It was certainly a highlight for me. No, it was great. I think it went really well for the first one. I think it's I was surprised how many people actually in Phoenix,
Me
that
too.
lived in Phoenix, came.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about this at the meetup. I, kind of thought I was the only person from Phoenix, even on these forums or reaching out to people or building a guitar or doing any of this stuff. And then once I put the word out that we were doing it, at least 4 or 5 people from Phoenix said, I'm going. And it's like they've just been kind of behind the scenes, on the forum watching this stuff. So that was cool for me, knowing that there was people from my hometown coming out. And it felt like this, in a way, it felt like a really kind of bizarre experiment in terms of like how far does the love of this guitar reach? Does it reach Arizona? How much is it here? Is it just me? And doing this kind of experiment, we found people all over the states, and obviously people in England and Europe. They're all into it, and people flew with their guitars out to do this, and so it felt like this very successful experiment. And we talked about this a lot on the day, different people in different groups, but how bizarre is it that a kid and his dad in their shed built this guitar and destroyed the world with it, and then we're getting together and talking about it and building our own copies and meeting in Phoenix, Arizona, of all places, to discuss it. Pretty wild.
It's pretty cool, isn't it? It's I like that whole thought around all of us before the internet, because some of this happened before the internet, and even during the internet, have been on the same path, the same love of the same guitar, and all falling in love with the story of it, of the father and son team, all around the world. And then all of a sudden we can all get together and share our common interest.
Definitely.
It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I mean, the way that I got into it, listening to Queen music was what got me started, but then I kind of started focusing on Brian, and then just, again, happy happenstance, the Guitarist magazine came out with Greg Fryer and the copies that he did and the restoration he did on Brian's guitar. And so that's kind of where my like crazy journey happened with this guitar. I started getting really into it, and I reached out to Greg before the time of the internet, and we were faxing back and forth. My dad had a fax machine at his job, so we would write these long faxes, and I still have some of them, on that like thermal paper, and they're interesting relics, and like you said, I mean, I remember downloading pictures of the guitar, and they would come across one line at a time, like it was printing on the screen, So it's we've come a long way.
The wonders of dial-up broadband, or dial-up internet.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that must have that's a good few years back now. Like, it's around 98, 99 that article was out, I think, in Guitarist.
Yeah, yep. I pulled out some of those materials today, and it was July '98, and I don't know when the first time I reached out to Greg was, but my dad was involved in that, and he has this personality of like, if you want to meet someone, you want to talk to someone, just find their number in the phone book and call them. And back then it was like doing an international call was really expensive, so he helped with that. And we just reached out, and like I said, I mean, it must have been right around that time, because maybe a little after, because we had to import the magazine to the States. There's only like one place we could find those kind of magazines in Phoenix. So we would always wait. We'd always go down looking for, guitar magazines. And so once that came in, we started discussing with him. Like, I have faxes from him from like 98 to about 2000. And I mean, very sporadic, but yeah, it was again like a really weird kind of first contact with someone into Brian May, like I was. It was Greg Fryer. I didn't know anyone else. So that, for me, that's pretty weird.
It's a pretty cool story though, because it's what I liked when you first told me, and it's a shame because your dad wasn't able to come to the meetup because I really wanted to meet him. Was that it's a father enabling his son to follow his dreams, which is exactly the same thing as the origins of the guitar.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I was kind of going back through it in my mind today. I used to spend summers with my dad because my parents were divorced, and he had this box of CDs, and basically, like, every weekend I would go down there, I'd pick like a different band. And so we grew up with the Beach Boys, but then in this box was the Beatles and the Hollies and Frankie Valli and Moody Blues, and then one weekend it was Queen. And while I liked all the other music, it was Queen that was the first one that really like spoke to me, and I think bizarrely, which most people I don't think I've ever heard anyone else admit this, the song that actually hooked me was Body Language.
Right.
And it was because it spoke to me in a weird way, because it just told me that music has no boundaries, and this band has no boundaries, and that's what drew me to Queen. But what drew me to Brian was how individual his playing was, and how particular it was just to him, that he didn't have to fit inside of someone else's box, and he didn't have to conform to what other guitar players did. And like, to me, that meant, okay, I can go do what I want to do now, because I see what he's doing with his influences, what he's cobbled together from Jimi Hendrix and Rory Gallagher and skiffle and Dixieland jazz, with the guitar that he made with his dad, and it turned into this music. And I thought, okay, I can do my own thing. And I didn't play music like Brian, but he gave me the push to make my own music, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something we've talked about again, which is just around how the whole story influences us. I can't say the word. Influences us all in a slightly different way.
Right.
And how you've got people in the group that play guitar. It's inspired people to play Queen music. It's inspired people to build guitars. It's inspired people to enable, like yourself, to think, actually, it's okay to be me and do what I want to do, and I'm allowed to, and I don't have to fall into this box of the guitar players that you probably would have listened to before him.
It's an odd thing.
He's got a lot to answer for, Brian.
Yeah, he does. Definitely he does. When I was growing up and looking for these guitars, the Guild was new, and we could never find one. Like, my dad and I, we would go hunting, and I wanted that Guild so bad, like for years and years and years, and we never saw anyone playing one. We never saw one in the store, and I always thought, like, where did they go? And the only thing I could ever work out is it's on someone's wall, in their dungeon or something like that, not being played. It's just in a glass case so that it can accrue interest and be sold one day in the future. And I thought, like, that's not what these things are for, So I really wanted to get one. And then I realized how expensive they were. And I thought, well, that's going to be a while. So then I had to make it.
Which took you on a nigh on 20-year journey to finally realize your goal and dream.
Yeah, but as you say, I mean, the Brian, his influence, it takes you in different places. It took everybody in a different place, or maybe it kind of shoved them to their rightful place that they were going anyway. But for me, I was kind of a weird kid, and didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I thought, I can do this. I want to do this. I want to make noises. I was really influenced by Radiohead at the same time. And so I kind of wanted to put these two things together, like real melodic music and sound effects. And I went for it, and the band, never really never really made it. We made a lot of music, and we were excited and we were happy, and it was all fine. And it kind of, petered out. But then I kind of kept it going. I kind of kept that influence, which for me just transferred into a different form, which turned into like photography for me, and like photographing my own band because we could never get band photos that we were all happy with. We didn't know what we were doing. Like I remember specifically watching the Wembley concert and going, pause it. Okay, see how they're framing Freddie right here? We need video like this. We need these. I was like learning how to do cinematography watching the Wembley concert, and I would hire my friends to come over and film us. When we had gigs, and I was like, all I want you to do is film the singer's head from head to shoulders. Like this is what And it was a weird. It's a weird track that it took me on. And then I started doing concert photography, and then I went into music videos and ultimately making movies. And it's been a weird thing, but like I can track it all back down to Brian and that guitar, because it just pushed me in my own way, and it kind of gave me a free pass to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It's you can tell as well that you speak really passionately about it. And I don't know if anyone's listening to this, but if anyone is, Luke is a very accomplished person, which I probably will go over too many times. But
well, I just tell you that I'm accomplished.
Yeah, well, there is that. I just believe you. No, earlier this year, Luke released a brand new film on iTunes, which ended up being the top in the sci-fi category for 2 or 3 weeks, Luke.
Yeah. Yep.
In the States.
Yeah, we put this thing out, and this was something we've been working on for a long time, and again, it was just the kind of thing we thought, we're gonna make our own thing. We're gonna make this weird sci-fi movie about time travel, about going backwards in time where other things are going forward in time. It's this kind of like realistic science type movie with different influences and things like that, and Lovecraft and things like that. And it was a risk. We didn't know if people would like it, and not everybody liked it, but we were kind of starting to find our following for that film, and yeah, we went number 1 in our category. So it's been a pretty wild ride. So we're working on the next thing, and I'm always trying to get a Queen song into a movie, but it's hard to make them fit into the weird stuff I make. But one day.
Yeah, I'm sure you will manage to get Queen into one video at some point. What's the film called, Luke, and where can people go and have a look at it?
The film is called Intersect, and you can find it on... anywhere you can find a movie, basically, you can find this movie, because we happen to get really good distribution, so it's pretty much available everywhere worldwide on most every platform, except for the streaming services. Netflix doesn't have it yet, and Prime, but we're on Amazon. Anywhere you can buy a movie, I guess I should say. So it's in a good spot right now, and we have a Blu-ray on our website if you want one.
It's definitely worth checking out, and you'll see some of Luke's work. And what's interesting is, for anyone that has ever watched or is aware of Luke's Red Special Build YouTube videos, is some of the shots in Intersect are very similarly filmed to that series of videos. And I was watching the film going, that's the same move he did in the build video, which nicely links us to your build videos, Luke.
Yeah, well, you told me that, and it was flattering, but I was also kind of like, what shots is he talking about? Because I mean, that movie was filmed a long time ago, and I guess you have your influence. So, but I was like, yeah, it's in there. I like my close-up macro shots, I guess. But
yeah, I think there's some movements that are. I'd have to go and watch it again, which I can do, and I will.
I'm not putting you on the spot.
I know it'll probably bug you, but there's a couple of shots when they're in the I can't think what the name of it is, where I don't want to ruin it either, but the big scientific thing that's made is
the portal.
They're in there, and you've got some panning shots and then some close-ups of the monitors and screens with some of the readouts, and I think it's a combination of the shot and the transition, and then the shot it follows into. So the sequence is very similar.
Yeah. There's some montage in there. I forgot about that.
yeah, but it's just the way that you can tell that you have a way of filming things and editing and putting things together. I think that's, having watched, I mean, I've shamelessly or shamefully watched your YouTube videos on your Red Special build probably more than I have watched Intersect.
I I think that's all right. I don't expect anyone to watch Intersect at all, let alone twice.
But I mean, like, I've watched these videos loads because you helped inspire me to actually put my own guitar together earlier this year and finally get on and do it, because you showed how to go about doing that, which is
Nice.
fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I kind of thought of it as like my way of kind of contributing something to the community, because I was kind of just a lurker on the forums and gathering information and learning how to do things myself, and I kind of felt like there wasn't a resource for the exact way that my brain works. I'm very visual, and I like seeing things being put together and things like that. I don't really like reading manuals, so that's why I did it. I wanted to have something that I could go, if someone said, how'd you make that? I go, watch these videos, and that's how I made it, and frankly, and then also just to show my dad, because we were going to work on this together, but it wasn't really feasible to do. I mean, I work weird hours, so like it was basically like progress reports from my dad.
It's a long-winded way of doing it, but it's fantastic. If you haven't checked it out, head over to Luke's YouTube channel, which I can never remember the name of.
Well, there isn't a very good way to find it. I think it's just Luke yourself. I think. Or you can just probably put in Red Special build and maybe Luke, and it'll come up.
And it's about 48 minutes long if you watch them all back to back. Not that I've ever done that many times, but it's certainly, if anyone that's out there wanting to build a Red Special or to understand the construction, Luke's methods and construction and choices are very authentic, and it's a very good how-to on how you can approach building a Red Special. And I've fortunately been able to play Luke's Red Special, and it is one of the nicest Red Specials I have played, and I have been very fortunate to have played most. So well done, Mr. Luke, on your
Thank
build.
you. You're very nice to
a
say
lovely
that.
guitar.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I did want to try to be as authentic as I could. I mean, because I'm a maniac for it, And so I've seen replicas and other guitars that are available, and I kind of just think, I think I would want it to look like this, and so I did it that way. I mean, it's not really a resource for people who need to know how to build it. Is the thing. It's for people already doing it. I think it's just kind of a help guide, is how I look at it. Like, if you get stuck with like, how does this thing go together? That's what it does. There's no plans available. I don't have that kind of stuff. So it's really just like a visual reference.
But it's the best visual resource out there. If you wanted to try and build one or understand what goes into building one, because the construction, which has always amazed me, is how Brian and Harold took what was available at the time and had a look at it, decided that it wasn't very good and that they could potentially improve on Fenders and Gibsons from back in the day, and they made it out of scraps around the home. And it doesn't like follow guitar rules. The mahogany neck does, I think, but using oak is, you talk to any luthier or exotic wood specialist and suggest oak as a tone wood, and they're like, no, oak's not a tone wood. What are you talking about, you crazy person?
But I think it's the perfect guitar for kind of smashing all of these ideas. Like you said, it doesn't follow anything in terms of the woods, like maybe the mahogany neck, but I wonder if that was, again, just out of necessity. We have this piece of wood that's roughly the size of the neck, so we're going to use it. I mean, if it was oak, would it have been oak? I think I counted at one point, at least for the guitar that I made, I think I ended up using 42 different pieces of wood, having glued together my own blockboard, not even knowing what it was. I remember Brian saying it's made out of blockboard, and I thought, like, okay, also I'll go buy some blockboard, and no idea what that was. But yeah, after I counted up all the pieces, including like the pieces of veneer that I had to glue together to make the top and the back and the sides, I think it was 42 individual pieces of wood. And that's a very weird way to do it. I mean, my dad likes to refer to the Telecaster as the slab guitar, because it's just one hunk of wood, and they cut some holes in it, and you're done. And Brian and his dad went, we're going to make this thing hollow, but how do we do that? And again, when you dive into it and you kind of see it come together, you see where they were in their heads, and like how we can achieve this with the things that we have, and gluing two pieces together and kind of drilling down or chiseling down into one and up into the other, like, gives you that chamber, and it's like, that's brilliant. And that's not what Fender would have done, but it works. Everything works, and everything works better than Fender. I mean, we could talk about how superior this guitar is, but just the fact that it is superior with the things that they had, like, there's no one way to do anything. And I think, again, that's like another analogy for Brian. Like, there's no one way to be a guitar player, and there's no one way to build a guitar, and it's like the perfect encapsulation of that. And
Definitely is.
If I could have, the one thing I wanted to do with the video, which I only did a little bit of, I wanted to make a stop animation of all the parts hopping into the guitar and like building itself. There's no practical way to do that, but that was the one thing I wanted to do. I wanted to like kind of Rubik's Cube itself together, but if I ever do it again, maybe.
Yeah, if you so you're thinking about another one then?
Not really.
The shot you did was with the switches, wasn't it? Where they hop along and jump into the switch plate, I think.
Yeah, and I did the switch. I mean, there's a couple of pieces. I can't remember. I think I did the switches, and I did like the block board making itself at the beginning, and maybe one or two other little tiny things. But yeah, I like stop animation.
Yeah, no, it's good. You can really see though that you not just in the build, the quality that you achieve, but in the videoing and the production that you put together just to make a YouTube video for, not just to, but you spent a long time doing it. You cared to make sure that you wanted the guitar to be how you wanted it to be. And I know it's not necessarily in the videos, but when you actually constructed your own, you had to redo things a couple of times.
Yeah. I mean, but I think you nailed it. Like it was just, I mean, it was really to appease myself. I wanted to make it the way that worked for me. Like if this had been there, this would have been the video that I would have chosen to watch because it worked for my brain. And so that's how I put it together. And I made him short. I put him to music. I put him to what started. I put it to a Queen song, and then I realized, well, I don't know if I should do that because they might get taken down off YouTube. So I started putting them to my own music, not to be vain, but just because I knew that I owned them. And so I kind of isolated the steps into 3 to 5 or 6 minute pieces just based on that. And it kind of dictates how fast the edit goes and things like that. And I don't know. I think it helps it keep it like bite size.
Definitely, and I think if you can sit down and watch it all in one go, which I have done a couple of times, and it it doesn't drag too much because they're short and it's truncated and it's in small chapters almost and sections and how you've done it. I definitely recommend checking it out if anyone wants to understand what goes into this guitar. Because it's a lot more work than a normal guitar, which is what we're trying to say, I think. But
yeah. I think if I had 2 disclaimers, one is build a different guitar first, because there's some amount of learning how a guitar works that I think would have saved me a lot of time with this build. Because as you said, I think I did the veneer 3 times, if not 4 on this, including the sides. I did the top and bottom, I think 2 or 3 times total, and just kept messing it up, sanding through, and I had to like sand it all the way off and just start over. I did the binding twice. It was a learning process, and I've never done this before. So I would say, build a Telecaster one time, build a kit Telecaster. Save yourself a lot of time, and just get some of that kind of be comfortable with doing it. The other disclaimer follows it right after that first disclaimer. I've never done this before, so take it as a guide, but not as a rule book, because if you mess up your guitar based on my video, I'd feel bad, but I'm telling you right now, I'm no expert.
I mean, yeah, I built mine after watching your videos. I did follow a lot of the techniques and similar paths that you took, but I did have my own views on a couple of things which I did differently.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just how I work and how I go about things. But if you didn't know and you wanted to understand what goes into this project, if you were to undertake it, which is a lot of work, you can watch Luke's videos and you can see there is a lot of work involved in it.
But it gives you more respect for Brian and Harold, for how much inventing they had to do, because this is not an intuitive way to build a guitar, but it's a great way to do it. So if nothing else, it will give you more respect for them.
And like you and I, Luke, I mean, your journey started in 1998, so you maybe not picking up details and thinking about plans and building one yourself for that whole time, but you've been slowly, like I was, generating enough knowledge to be able to put together to understand what all the different woods were and how the construction might happen, and looking at pictures and picking up tiny details and curating the parts that need to go into this thing to try and make it as accurate as you can, so that you feel comfortable that it's as faithfully close as you can. But we're like nigh on 20 years of research and having something to copy. But back in the early 60s, a 16-year-old and his father were like, yeah, we're going to make a guitar, and we're going to make it out of the stuff lying around the house, and yeah, we're going to just do it. And
we're just going to do it. We're just going to build the best guitar. Yeah, I know. It's wild to me. I mean, it every time I learn something about this guitar, and like, there's never not a new thing to learn. There's always some weird little screw that got used, and you go, where the hell did that come from? But the more you hear about it, the more you learn about it, the more respect you have for them, and just that kind of, British attitude of like, we're just gonna do it. We're gonna build the best guitar there ever was, and in our shed, and it's wild to me, and it's inspiring, and yeah, I mean, like I say, it really kind of drove me to doing a lot of what I've done, just because it's just that most basic inspiration of you can do anything if you put your mind to it. And you can't necessarily be Brian May out of Queen, but you can build a guitar if you really put your mind to it. You can do that, Depending on how you set your goals, you can do anything you set your mind to.
People look at it as well and go, I couldn't do that, but I don't know. I think like that's true, but I think again, people see it and think how hard it is, but there's a lot of resources out there, and there's a lot of people to help along the way. And I know that you helped me with mine immensely. So not only the videos, but when I constructed mine, Luke was pretty much on call every day. So I was like, Luke, I need to screw this screw in. Any advice? And he'd politely come back and go, yeah, you need to just screw that in, John. Or make sure you do it in this sequence, because I learned to do this because the first time I did it, it went wrong. Or practice on a separate piece of wood, or build another one, so when you break the first one, which you will, then you're not upset because you've got to build it again. All those bits of advice were really helpful.
Yeah, not to name drop too much here, but I work on a different podcast, which maybe you mentioned, and we got to interview Brian. And
you did. I was going to come on to that, so well done.
Okay,
thank you.
Perfect.
No.
we it was dream come true. I mean, every time a name comes up, when we were like, what's the next podcast going to be? I was like, how about Brian May? Because it's a science-based podcast. It's a podcast that kind of focuses on the intersection of science and culture and entertainment in that way. And I made the case that no one is a better example than Brian May, because he is a pillar in both communities, obviously in rock music and music generally, but in science as well. And the way we got to him is because our host knew the head of the NASA program that Brian was working on for New Horizons, and we were going to get them both on at the same time. And it just happened to work out, in my fortune anyway, that Brian couldn't do it at the same time. So he said, the only way we can do it is if you come to my house. And I thought, perfect, we'll do it. And we happened to be going to England anyway, and we were getting other interviews. And it was just the most amazing experience for me. And for me, I try to err on the side of playing it cool to the point of playing it way too cool. But fortunately, the host of the podcast and my friends and my brother who helped me with the podcast all just kind of said, "He's building your guitar." So it kind of broached itself that way. So I got to talk to Brian a little bit about building the guitar and the process, and interestingly, about how they there were prototypes of different items and things like that, different tremolos, which most people know. I didn't know that he kept all those things. So he's got all those, and I was like, oh man, that's amazing. So it's interesting to know that the experimentation that went on behind the scenes, and how influential his dad was on him. Really made an impact on me, obviously, because of the parallel with my dad. So that was a very special experience. So yeah, it was like this weird culmination of going through this weird series of my life, and then ending up in Brian May's house, which I didn't tell him all this, but yeah, it was a pretty wild ride for me.
It sounds very Luke, knowing you.
Yeah.
So just I've never actually asked you this, but when you met him, what stage in your build were you?
Well, I mean, to know exactly, I honestly can't remember. I mean, I hadn't bolted the two pieces together. I think the body was no. I mean, I think the body was I think the neck was done. Maybe didn't have frets. Maybe that's where I was. But the body was finished and polished and just kind of sitting and hardening. And I think I was working on the frets. And when our host told Brian I was building the car, I was like, "Where is it?" Like, well, it's in two pieces in Phoenix. Like, oh damn. But he was very polite and very nice. I mean, as everybody will ever say about Brian, he was very accommodating and very sweet to me to talk to me about it, and got a photo with him, which I like hate asking people for photos. I hate being that guy, but luckily, like I said, everybody else asked for me, so it was a very nice visit for me.
No, I've never met him myself, so jealous as usual of your endeavors. But
well, he's got to come to one of these meetups at some point.
Well, the other thing I was going to do was now is a great time to talk about it. Is one of the benefits of having a podcast about something is, and hopefully people will listen, is that someone listening one day might know Brian May and go, "Oh, there's a Red Special Guitar podcast." So today I'd like to launch the Get Brian May and the Red Special on the Red Special Guitar podcast campaign. If you'd like to follow that, anyone that knows Brian and can point this in his direction, you're more than welcome to join us, Dr. May. We'd love to chat to you about your inspiration for the guitar and all things that you would be happy to talk to. So that's officially something I'm going to talk about in every episode until he's on.
Yeah, there you go. You never know where it's going to go, man. Luke. Yeah.
I mean, your story's great. Like the whole Greg Fryer involvement. Am I right in thinking you're still in touch with Greg today, 20 years later, 22 years later?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we had like a dark period there, where we didn't speak, but I was in high school when I first started talking to him, and I think the only reason he really cared about talking to me was because I was not necessarily a Brian May style guitar player using his gear. So he was kind of interested in the signal path that I was using, because our music was kind of a mix of Radiohead and REM, and it was a different style of music. So I think that was the kind of appeal for Greg to keep talking to me, other than I was buying his stuff. But no, he's been very cool to me, and coming back to the forums and doing the meetup and things like that. Like I've gotten more in contact with him than I had been over the past few years. But no, he's like I said, he sent me some pedals for some treble boosters for the meetup, some spares, and so we could sell them, so people had opportunity to actually try them out firsthand, which we don't have over here, at least especially in Arizona. And he he's just been very sweet to me and sharing a lot of information and giving me tips on my build and things like that. So yeah, it's been pretty wild. Like, and as I said, it was like he was the first non schoolmate um, person that I spoke to about Brian May, and it was like it's just weird to think about that now.
He was brilliant. So on the meetup, you did your section on the treble booster demo, and you well, I don't know that you asked me, but I stood up and decided I would talk whilst you were playing guitar.
Yeah, well that kind of happened naturally because I think, as you know, you kind of can't do everything when you're hosting your meetup, and so just the physical act of holding a microphone and playing guitar and talking about the treble booster and setting up the next treble booster, you need a couple hands for that. So that I definitely roped you in against your will, but I think it worked out. So I thank you for that.
Double act. Yeah, no worries. Anytime. Invoice in the post.
Yeah.
And you're right, Luke, that one of the difficult things I've always struggled with this whole Red Special thing is that when I found the forum, you could find that you need a Red Special guitar, you need a treble booster, you need an AC30. Well, we can all go down to our local guitar store and try an AC30, although trying it out full, you probably get told off. But nowhere really stocks Brian May treble boosters.
Right.
You can like walk in and plug one in, so you are buying them off of the back of the strength of someone else has bought one blind or without hearing it from a guy in Australia or from a guy in England or from wherever, and they're saying this is the sound, and you kind of you can't go and pick one up and plug it in and listen to it. You have to spend your money and hope that you got it right, and that's what I really like about the meetups, and is that you've got a wide variety of people with all this different experience and all on a similar journey, but everyone brings a bit of kit or their treble booster or their guitar or their AC30 or their chorus, and it's a great chance to actually hear them live yourself, hear how that interacts, maybe have a play with it.
Yeah, and my one anecdote for that is when I contacted Greg, I didn't have an AC30. I had just bought like what I would consider my first professional amp, which was a Fender Twin Reverb, which is a totally different kind of amp from the AC30. And as I was playing in a garage in Phoenix, Arizona, we weren't set up for Wembley Stadium. So I would turn my amp on to where it just started to make noise, and that was my setting. Just barely loud on, And I got the treble booster, and Greg said, when you get an AC30, I will walk you through how to get the sound. And I thought, great, this is going to be amazing. So I got an AC30, and even louder than the Twin Reverb. Impossible to use in the settings that I played in. Little bars and things like that around here. And I plugged the treble booster in. I'm like, here we go. It's going to be amazing. And it wasn't. Was the honest answer, because I was not caning those tubes. It was so quiet. In relation to the way Brian plays, it didn't work. I didn't get that sound. And there was a band that was older than us, and there was their guitar player was like a really great blues player. He was like one of the best guitar players in Phoenix that I'd ever seen. And I went to his house and I was like, "Can you try this pedal out and tell me what I'm doing wrong?" And he plugged it in, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And it's just because he had his settings. They were set up, and then you plug the treble booster in, and you get more. You get extra. It sweetens your sound. You get sustain. You get all these little things. But for me, being in this weird band that I was in with, effect pedals and overdrive pedals and things like it didn't work in my path. So I kind of had to like figure out how to use it. And, but it's that kind of thing. Like, it's not intuitive, even though I obviously knew how Brian did it, in theory, it didn't work for me. And so being able to go to the meetup, I mean, 2 or 3 of the guys from Phoenix came to me and they just said, "I've never heard a guitar sound like that." And it was just having the right setup, using an attenuator and things like that. And it's those kind of things they're not intuitive, and you can't ask your non Brian May fan friend how to do it, because it's just not that simple. You have to have the right tools, the right settings, and you have to have things in the right spot, And I used to hear Brian say things like, if you're standing in the right spot, next to the amp, you can have this thing sustain forever. And I was like, how's he doing that? But like when you play on stage and you can turn up louder and louder and louder, you start to realize that. You start to realize that the guitar comes alive and it's this weird animal and you can control it. But when you're playing in your bedroom, it makes no sense. There's no way to relate to that. So I think, again, like as a resource for other people, it was, the meetup that you host, it shows you so much of these other products and, the pieces of the sound, and being able to illustrate how they work. It was great. And I wanted that experience, frankly. I wanted it here, and I wanted people to come out and bring all their pedals, and I just wanted to plug them all in and go, that's how you get this sound. That's how you get this sound. So yeah, so it was as much a selfish endeavor as it was for everybody else. So,
well, to be honest, that's why I started the UK meetup back in 2016.
Yeah.
Is I'd had a difficult time in life and sort of moved away from the Brian May world and came back to it, and then just thought, wouldn't it be great to get all my mates together again and see what everyone's playing these days, and posted up, would anyone like to come along? And it's turned into what it's turned into. And for me, it's become more about the people. I guess, like meeting yourself and becoming friends and chatting more, and then getting everyone together with a different background and looking and understanding what gear they use and seeing them, and it becomes more than the guitar. And you go back to why we're all there, and you think this Brian May has a lot to answer for.
Yeah. I mean, I made the joke to you already, but imagine if him and his dad had built a treehouse.
Yeah. Yep. It would be a bit different, wouldn't it?
Be a very weird meetup.
An oak, mahogany, blockboard treehouse.
But I bet it sounds amazing.
Yeah. Just going back to what you were talking about the guitar though, with the settings and whatnot, one of the things that, if you haven't ever played a traditional sort of authentically built Red Special with an oak core with blockboard, is as soon as you pick the thing up and you strum that A chord, which is what everyone should do when you pick up a Red Special, is the whole guitar vibrates on you, not massively, but you can feel the thing resonate. And you don't get that unfortunately you don't get that on a BMG so much, and you don't get that on a Fender so much. But you pick up one of these things that's got the chambers and the right sort of orientation and a bit of oak and a nice piece of mahogany on it, and you strum it and you feel the whole thing move. And then when you get to the meetup, or if you have the chance to play the full rig at a decent volume, you can feel the guitar interacting with the sound coming out of the speakers of the amplifier, and almost intuitively you can then control it, and it makes the playing experience, to me anyway, it makes the playing experience more pleasurable because you feel that connection with it.
Definitely. And that's one of those things you can't describe that to a non-guitar player for sure, but even in somebody who isn't into this exact guitar, it sounds like woo magic stuff. It's like, oh man, this guitar's alive. But it really does. You can feel the air in the guitar. You can feel it pulsing, and you can feel when the string is going to feed back naturally, and not just from the overdrive. You can feel it start to feeding back on itself, and you can control the sustain. You can control the pitch and things. And I went years having this gear and never experiencing that. And it's until you get to the right settings, you don't. So it just sounds like magic. And but once you hear it, and you can experience it, you actually feel it. I mean, it's hard to say that it translates to the listener, but when you're playing it, it's there. It's in your fingers. And maybe you could argue it doesn't make you sound better, but it makes you play differently. You feel it's a different sensation in your hands, and you can do different things with it. And it's this kind of thing. I remember speaking to Merlin in France on the forum, because he was getting really deep into the digital interfaces, trying to get into the Brian May sound, and getting all the delays and the choruses and things like that. And I was like, do you have amps? Have you ever plugged into amps? And he's like, I can't do it, where he lives. And then he eventually did, And it wasn't like I was trying to slag off the digital stuff, but there is a different experience when you're in front of a loud amp. Like you respond differently, the guitar responds differently, and the room is different, you know. And it's just, it's a special thing, regardless of how good it sounds. I mean, I used to love just getting feedback going with my band and like putting delay and tremolo and like doing weird things with feedback that were not musical, but like I enjoyed. but you can't you can't experience that without an amp, you know. So it's a special thing to when you feel that, when all those things work for you, for your sound that you're going for, whether it's your own sound or Brian May's sound. When you feel it, you go, now I get it.
I think it's just sort of reflecting on what you're saying there and resonating with me. It's almost like, as well, when I get to the opportunity at home to plug mine all in and turn it all up full and use the attenuators on a decent setting, there's a responsibility there to look after the sound, because it can get out of control pretty easily, but you're kind of responsible for it, and so you take it, you own it a lot more, because you've got this power there to look after, if that makes
sense. With great power comes great responsibility, John.
It certainly does. But I think another thing that, and I guess I'm pitching going to meetups at the minute without really realizing, but it's those things that you don't get unless you push the amps properly. But one of the questions that comes up on the forum a lot is around, I've turned my AC30 up and I'm getting this, I plugged the treble booster in and I'm getting this horrendous hiss sound. Is that right? And it doesn't feel, like you were saying earlier, Luke, it doesn't feel natural to then turn your guitar up and listen, because it seems like at that state it's not going to be right. That snowstorm is not a good sound. But until you push through and then you start turning the guitar up and you go to the right place, then you realize that is the right sound, and that's what you're looking for, because without that, without the storm, you don't get the nice part at the end of it.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things to be said about that too. If you're playing, when I first got the AC30, the first thing I did was turn it all the way up and just see what it sounded like. And, my air conditioning vents rattled and things fell off the wall, and I was like, cool, it's loud, but I can't do anything with that, but that's one side of it. One side of it is damn loud in your bedroom, and it's impossible to do anything with. And then when you're too afraid to turn your volume up and actually hear it, all you can hear is that whoosh, and you're just going, if that's that loud, everything else is going to be crazy loud. But there's two things with that. When you mic an amp for recording and you're playing, like, a lot of that doesn't come through. A lot of that is in the room and it's in the air, but if with a close-up microphone, a lot of that goes away. It's not like a crazy thing. But when you're playing with a band, again, things fill each other in, and you have to take precautions to not get crazy going over everybody else, but all those things, they fill each other in, and then it kind of makes the sound more full. Like, I remember I'd hear bands from Phoenix, they would get their albums made, and I used to have these huge pedal boards full of different effects, and there was like a band that I liked, and he would do some cool stuff with pedals, so I was like, I bought his album. And I was like, how did you do the delays on this song? He's like, we didn't. That was all put in post. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, we just played clean, and then they added all the effects. And I was like, that's so depressing, because that guy, in my mind, he crafted his sound, and he went to the studio, and they said, turn all that off. We'll do it in post. And it came out sounding so sterile. It was clean, and neat, but so sterile, and like, I didn't want to listen to it. But when you see him live, there was this gel, and maybe it is that hiss and all that noise. But if you start taking that stuff away, you kind of chip away at the magic of live music.
Yeah, you can, if anyone has ever taken a Queen song or one of those multi-layered tracks that you can download and listen to the raw sound and isolated parts, you can hear the AC30 in the background, you can hear the drums kicking through on some of the guitar tracks and vice versa, and there's a rawness to Queen songs when you take the layers away that sounds like a polished, perfect piece at the end.
But that's why they're polished and perfect, because it's an amalgam of sound. Like if you play a G, I think it's a G. If you play a G on the bass, the snare drum will just go, but it's like every snare drum will do that, but it's just part of music,
Sort of reminiscing in my head about the Queen sounds that made me fall in love, and you just, especially the guitar, there's something about that sound and the rawness of it, but the organicness that it sounds like. But then that's like electronically, I don't know. It's the combination he achieved with the home build guitar, bumping into Rory Gallagher and asking about a treble booster, buying an AC30. I mean, again, how different this story could have been if he hadn't bumped into him, or if Rory had said, "Not telling you, mate. We do it all in post."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we just let some other guy figure it all out. We don't even know what we're doing. No, it's great. I used to have a list. I lost it. I would have referenced it for this, but I had this list that I used to send people because people found out that I like Queen. I'm when I really like something, everybody around me knows that I like it, and eventually people go, all right, how do I get into this? Whatever it is. And so I had a thing I called Queen School, and it was a list of, in my mind, here's how you navigate the Queen waters. Here's how you get a little bit of the operatic stuff. Here's how you get the rock stuff. Here's how you get the Dixieland jazz stuff. Here's the orchestrations, and it was like a path to understanding, in my mind, how Queen worked. And I tried to isolate certain noises from Brian's guitar, and the one that always stuck with me is like Dreamer's Ball or Winter's Tale, that Deaky amp sound. And to me it always sounds sticky, and it sounds like cotton candy, like sticky cotton candy is being played. That's what the guitar is made out of, is like sticky cotton candy. And like I hear that, and like so now every time I hear something going for the Deaky amp sound, is like, is it sticky? There's this noise in his fingers that is not in the note that comes through with that amp. And that's one of those things where I go, that sound, that like plucky stickiness is something that I love about that sound. And it's almost like an aberration. It's almost something you would want taken out. But his finger on those strings, that's one of the things that brought me to this guitar. It's like, it's such an individual sound. I love it.
I just think the whole story's great, and it's I mean, the Deaky's a subject for another day maybe, because that's the whole other few hours of discussion around that little beastie. But again, like, you take the story, and I guess at the time Brian's probably, they're not thinking what a great story this is. Like, oh, I built the guitar with my dad, and I certainly don't think they ever built it thinking that it's gonna go on tour around the world, because of what it's made from, and how it's held up. I mean, it held up pretty well, and it's had a bit of work done to it over the years. But it wasn't. I don't know. It just wasn't made to travel the world and be on every Queen album ever. And then, I mean, that's really rare as well. Not many guitar players build the guitar, then use it on every studio recorded song, and then take it with them around the world and play it night after night after night.
No. I mean, I was trying to think of people that had, and I think The Edge built a guitar, and I remember them kind of going, yeah, but once we started playing, we realized I needed to buy a real guitar. And Eddie Van Halen obviously built a guitar, but even that was like, it was kind of I wasn't a big follower of Eddie Van Halen, but like, it felt like he went through phases with his guitars, and it was like, now we're building a new one, and it's going to be a new thing, and which I respect too. But I really like that Brian has been able to take this guitar and turn it into whatever he wants, and you could pick up a Strat, you could pick up a Rickenbacker, but he didn't want to. He's like, nope, I'm going to give myself a constraint and do something with this one guitar. And I think that's really cool. It's like in photography, if you pick up one lens and go, I'm going to try to shoot everything with one lens, your mind starts to work differently. Because when you have 5 lenses in your bag, you go, okay, we're shooting this chapel, get the wide lens, and you instantly just fall into these like routines. Whereas if you kind of push yourself into a situation that you only have one way out, then you become inventive in that way. If that makes sense, yeah.
And you've only got to listen to Queen's back catalogue to see how inventive he's been throughout the years and how he's been able to change the sound and the tone. I mean, and we've not even really touched on the wide availability of different tones in the guitar through the pickup switching system and what they were able to achieve there, because that is, again, just so innovative.
Expressive, too.
And has stood the test of time as well. You know, he's still using the same system and he still can sound like whatever he wants to sound like, and through his amps and the ability of just using the volume rather than a pedal to stomp for distortion, it definitely feels like it's an extension of him. And I've always thought, which is something we've talked about, that one of the reasons he's carried on using it all this time is not only because it's distinctive to his tone and his sound, but is that connection every time he plays it to his father, Harold. He picks it up, and it's that relationship's being reminded. He's reminding himself of his dad and him working on it in the shed on those winter's nights, chipping away at the wood, and it's sort of like it's a bit of him and a bit of his dad he's picking up every night.
Yeah, I mean that's a relic of just full of memories and experience and trials and tribulations all in one guitar, and think of how much work went into it. And I mean, I think it'd be weird to leave it home. I think there was an interview with him. Somebody said, "Well, you're not going to take that on the road." And he's like, "Well, yeah, I have to take it on the road." And I mean, you understand that after a while. If you play guitar and you develop a sound, or you just develop a comfortable situation with your band or with your own sonic influence, you rely on it. I mean, some people can switch guitars and it's not a big deal, but I think when you make that connection, sometimes it's even if you're playing a $50,000 guitar and somebody's like, "Oh, you can't take that one," it's like, no, this one works. This is what works for me. I can't change it. So I think that makes sense to me. The thing that I always wonder about, I was reminiscing the other day, and I was looking through some old photos, and I found a photo of myself rehearsing with our band, like the first year of our band, and I used to carry my pedals around in a briefcase, and I would just set them up on the stage. And I remember thinking, wonder what Brian was like the first time out, like pulling out your homemade guitar, as cool as it is now. I don't know if he was that confident back then to put this homemade guitar on with a treble booster. Like, what was it? Was it just stuff just sitting on the floor? I wonder how he felt the first time out. Or if it was just brilliant from the beginning.
I often wonder this too, because there's clearly a point in Queen where they become, I wouldn't say arrogant, but they start to realise that they are probably the best band around at the time. And although they appreciate and understand other musicians, there's a definite, especially in their live performances, that you can tell as they go on through the years, they start to get that confidence. And
yeah, they're confident and they're comfortable.
And that's like arrogance, that they are, they're better than everything else that's out there. But you're right, there must have been a point before that where, I mean, you and I have built our own guitars, and taking them to a meetup or speaking to friends that understand it is one thing. But trying to pitch it to someone that has no idea what it is, and what it means and why it's so important to you as an individual. So, like, before COVID, we had some family come over and I had all the parts laid out, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to build this guitar, it's awesome. Brian made it with his dad when he was young, and I'm going to build one, and it's going to be as close as I think I can get it, and it's something I wanted to do for the last 20 years, and blah, blah, blah. And they're just like, oh, that's cool. Why don't you just buy one?
Yeah, you see eyes glazing over, and they start rolling in the back of their head, and they're just nodding. And it's, yeah, I mean, but this is the thing. Any project I work on, I always remind people, any project you're ever doing, no one is going to like it as much as you. It will never be as important to anyone as it is to you. And I think the thing like that you were saying about Queen and their confidence, I think the way that I see it is they realized they were the best at being Queen. And so that, they didn't have to think about what other people were doing. they went out with confidence because we figured out who we are and we're doing it, and there's no one else. No one else exists when we're doing it. So I think that's where the confidence comes in. But you don't have that confidence your first gig. At least I didn't.
Well, a long time ago, I used to play in a local tribute band as Brian, and that first time, I remember some chap coming up to me as I was literally unpacking my. I think I bought some replica someone had made not very well and had a janky pedal board and an AC30 with an attenuator, and you're unpacking it, and this rather burly bloke from Torquay comes over and, "You're not the bloody guitarist, are you? You'll be shit." And I mean, he was right. Thanks, but like,
yeah.
and they know that we're gonna try and play Queen music, but imagine not knowing what that is and that whole experience of turning up with that. And also, he didn't have an attenuator back then, so a full-blown AC30 treble booster and a homemade guitar, and you'd be in the audience thinking, what the hell are we going to listen to now?
Yep.
That must have been an experience, though. Cause
yeah, it definitely would be an experience.
I get upset that I'm not old enough to have been able to see them with Freddie live.
Yeah.
So I think that would have been a real experience to see them all together.
Definitely. Yeah. But, I mean, at least we have all this music and we have the concerts. I mean, I used to live off of the Wembley show and Star Licks, and like I would just watch those over and over again. And
aren't those the only two videos?
Those are the only two videos that existed, at least until the internet came around. And yeah, so I mean, we have what we have, and I've been lucky enough. I've seen him a few times now. I got to see him when they came out with Paul Rogers for the first time. They played 2 shows in the States, and I remember sitting online and just hitting refresh, and I got 2 tickets, and or got a few tickets. I took my dad, and we went to the Hollywood Bowl, and Slash showed up, and it was amazing. And I'll never forget, not everybody's experience is your experience. And when we went to the Hollywood Bowl is like, it's a very cool venue, but it's also full of like yuppie scum, because the way that the seats work, they're seats of 4, they're boxes of 4, and the front 2 seats can turn backwards, so you can put a table up and you can eat while the concert's playing. So all around us, these people were just eating and talking, and well, we were in the cheap seats, and I remember Roger coming out at one point and doing a song at the front of the stage, and he's just like, "It's been a long time since we've been here." He's like, "Did I just see a fucking waiter walk by?" It's like, "Yeah, you did." But I remember, I felt like this might be my only chance to see that guitar up close. So towards the end of the show, I just ran up to the stage. I had like a little I had like a little 2.1 megapixel digital camera, like one of the first, crappy cameras to ever come out. And I just ran up to the stage, up to the catwalk, and he was doing a guitar solo. And I was just like, that's the guitar right there. And it was amazing. And I mean, I would have gone just to see him and the guitar, but you had Roger there, you had the music, you had everybody having a good time. It was amazing.
I got a similar story. Same thing. They came over to the UK and they played Hyde Park, and I couldn't find anyone to go with, so I ended up taking my cousin, who's a bit younger than me, and he was up for a bit of adventure. So we got to Hyde Park at 10 a.m. And we sat in line from 10 a.m. in the morning till whenever they came on, and we managed to be like 3 people back from the front on the side that Brian was on. So it specifically placed ourselves there to make sure that we got a good shot of the guitar, and all I wanted was to see the guitar in person. And then you enjoy the show and you're kind of like, oh, this is good, isn't it? And then went on to go and see them a few more times. But yeah, my aim was to, in many ways, just see the guitar and be in the same space as it, and hopefully catch sound of the AC30. And
exactly, I just wanted to hear it. Yeah, they played the Forum a couple years back. I think it was the first tour with Adam Lambert, and they were excited to play the Forum again, and I was like, well, I gotta go. So I got 2 tickets, and I think it was like a day of the week or something, and I couldn't find anyone to go with me. It was in LA and I live in Phoenix, so it was, I had to make a 6-hour drive to go see Queen, and I couldn't find anyone to go. So I drove out to LA by myself and watched Queen by myself. But I had 2 seats to spread out in, and that was a weird experience. But it was also, it was weird and like isolating. But when you're at a Queen concert, it's like a big family, you know. And when Love of My Life comes on, everybody's singing it. It's like, oh gosh, this is something special. So go even if you can't find anyone to go with you, is the message there.
Yeah, definitely. And it is. I've like lots of people been to lots of different gigs and music, and I've taken my wife who also loves music, and we've been to see loads of different bands, and we've got a bucket list, and we've only got a few people left that are alive that we need to see to complete this list of bands. And she was a bit dubious when we went to see Queen and Adam Lambert, and she came away and said that's the best experience of live music I've ever heard in my life, with the audience participation and you feeling like they're performing at you, and you are there with thousands of people, and you're part of something.
That's one of those things. I don't think you can impart that on people. It's like the guitar. Like, you have to experience it. You know, I used to work for a newspaper. I used to take concert photos, and the very first person I ever worked with, the very first writer I ever worked with, she's kind of I always assume she's kind of more hardcore and listen to metal and things like that. And I've bumped into her a few times since. You know, like she's covered gigs that I was filming or something like that. You know, so like we would see each other. And I went and saw Queen and Adam Lambert last time they were in Phoenix, and I was like, man, that was amazing. And she subsequently wrote an article about the year. You know, it was one of those things like, you know, what's the coolest album of the year? You know, what's the biggest letdown of this or whatever. And it got to, what's the best concert you've ever seen? And she said, Queen and Adam Lambert. And I was like, I don't know why I was surprised, but I was surprised from her, you know, because of the music that she listens to. But I think even it hit her even the same way. You can't leave that experience and go, it was all right. You know, it's you know how much work they put into it, and how hard they're trying to reach all those people, and it's that essence of Freddie is still there, and you reach everybody. And I mean, I know some people I know a guy that used to work with Queen, and even he was like, he was crying at the end, because he's just like, it's amazing. They still do it. They still have that reach.
All of my friends get in touch with me to let me know that there is something Queen on, just to make sure I haven't missed it, because they know how much of a massive part of my life it is. And there was a documentary on this week on Queen on Channel 4 in the UK that was on, and I got, like, my phone just lights up with people telling me there's a documentary about Queen. But one of the interesting stats that came through from this is that one of my friends messaged me to say that I think Bohemian Rhapsody is the most streamed song ever on Spotify, I think. And I think Queen have never been so popular before as they are today, based off of what they've been doing recently, and obviously the Bohemian Rhapsody film and the strength of having Adam with them. And I just find that amazing to think, you know, if again, in the story of Brian and his dad in the shed building this guitar, and, you know, if it was me doing something with my dad, or I'm sure if it was you with yours, you'd be like, oh, just imagine if we built this thing and it went on to be this thing that I used for the rest of forever, whatever it is you're doing, and become something bigger. And they're like, oh yeah, I wonder if you're going to end up being a famous guitar player with this guitar.
Yeah.
And yeah, he did. And then he stayed being one of the top guitar players in all time forever. And then when he was in his 70s, he went on a live tour after making a biopic film about the band, and then became even bigger than they were when they were in their heyday. It's just an amazing story.
I mean, you can't beat the story, and you can't beat the music. And
No.
having been to that concert, having been to a number of the concerts, but especially the Forum concert, because I wasn't with anyone, as we were kind of all exiting the arena, I was listening into to conversations. And I was actually really surprised how many Adam Lambert fans there were who were listening to Queen for the first time. And it's an obvious thing to say that Adam Lambert will bring a different crowd, but I was actually very surprised how many people that was, and how young they were. And I just thought it was brilliant, because the music is timeless. I mean, you can't do better than these songs. So if you've never been introduced to them, I mean, it's the perfect way, what they're doing with their legacy and reintroducing it to people. I think it's perfect because there's always new people to listen, and those songs are always going to be hits.
The whole thing is amazing. The whole thing is, you listen to any one of the greatest hits songs, so that first album, which is how I started off curating my knowledge on Queen songs, when my dad gave me a slightly yellowy tape with Queen's greatest hits, because I'd watched Wayne's World and asked my sister profusely, what was that song they headbanged to? What was it? Like, it's Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. He's like, do we have this in the house? And then later on, my dad presented me with this old cassette tape, the slightly yellowy one in the original box. And I was like, who the hell are these guys? Plugged it in, and away you go. And it's a lot to answer for, that film. Mike Myers, you have a lot to answer for. But those songs are still as relevant today as they were when they were made. Under Pressure came on the radio yesterday, and I was listening to the words of Under Pressure, and you're just like, this is pretty much... they're songs, you can relate them to whatever you want to, but just thinking of this year and everything that's going on with COVID and the pandemic around the world and what everyone's going through, and it's like, they could have written this year about this. It's a timeless... They write timeless songs that relate to any era.
Very universal and relatable.
Every generation is able to relate to them, and they have countless songs. I think that's what always gets me with them. It's not just one hit wonder, or they wrote something that every song, well, not every song, but a lot of songs are hits. Or
right, and you have a lot to pick from. You have a lot of genres to go through. I mean, you get something different on every album. I think it's a band. It's a band for everyone.
Definitely is. And it all started off with a red special guitar, which actually isn't red either, which has always made me chuckle.
I'm sure it makes him chuckle too. I wonder if it was red at one point. I wonder if there's any blood involved in the staining. There's a movie called Red Violin. There's a movie called The Red Violin that follows this violin, and it has a storied past, and it was stained with blood, and I was like, that's cool. I should stain a guitar with blood. But
yeah, but you gotta check to see. You gotta put water on it though to see what rustings will look like over the top. That's the key there.
Yeah.
For anyone doing the staining of their guitar, if they're using blood or any other kind of stain, you want to know what it's going to look like.
Do a sample.
I mean, there are options. There are options, but if you put a bit of water on top when it's dry, you can see what it's going to look like when you put the finish on. It's a little tip there for everyone. There is actually blood in my guitar though from my build, where I can't remember what I was cutting by hand, but I was cutting something and I had to be on a call for work, and I cut like what was it was with a scalpel. What was I doing with this? Maybe binding, and I slipped and sliced the end of my finger nearly clean off. And
nice.
I had blood all over it, and I couldn't get it out, so it's still in there. But I kept being asked why I was so white on this call for work.
Nice.
Well, Luke, that's been brilliant to talk to you today. I've taken up far too much of your valuable time, where you can be earning money and doing lots of other creative stuff.
Well, I've had a blast.
It's been good. I think we've got some other bits we could cover off at another time, which would be good. We go a little bit deeper into your Greg Fry history, but for anyone that hasn't checked out any of Luke's work, I would highly suggest heading over to the Red Special Forum on Facebook and checking out all of Luke's posts, heading over to YouTube and looking up Luke yourself, heading to iTunes or any other approved video distribution thing online and checking out Intersect. And then there's the one thing we haven't talked about, which is your Sherlock podcast. I think we've spoken about your science. Lawrence Krauss? I forget what the name of that podcast is.
It's the Origins podcast.
Which Luke's involved in. And then Luke has his own podcast with his brother Gus, talking all things Jeremy Brett, Sherlock Holmes, the old Granada series from the UK, which again is worth a listen if you are a fan of anything Sherlock.
If you're into a very niche podcast, We take very deep dives, far too deep, into every episode of the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes series from Granada. It was something, again, from my dad, influenced from my dad. Watching Masterpiece Theater in the States, they would play them, and we just, from an early age, we were hooked on those, and my brother and I discussed them constantly, and we eventually just went, we should maybe do a podcast and see if anyone else cares about this kind of stuff. And they do. They're out there.
You've inspired me too many times this year, Luke, because you've made me make it. Well, not made me, but you inspired me to complete my guitar. You've helped me come up with this idea of a podcast, which is one of many ideas we had when I was in the States, but this seems like the most feasible one. So yeah, you've got a lot to answer for too.
Well, I'm happy. I'm happy to answer for it. I'm happy to help.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
It's been great, and thank you for putting up with me for an hour or so.
I had a great time. Till the next meetup.
Till the next meetup. And that was Luke. Make sure you check out his Facebook page, Luke H Guitar Blog, his YouTube channel, Luke Yourself, and make sure to download Intersect the Movie from iTunes or Amazon. I said earlier that Brian was one of the only artists I know to use the same guitar for most of his career, or if not all of his career. He has used a few other guitars along the way. But interestingly enough, he's also used the same rig throughout his career. That rig consisting of the Red Special guitar, really a curly guitar lead, although that's changed in recent years, then flowing into a treble booster, of which you can purchase all different kinds and sorts, but he started with a treble booster after a discussion with Rory Gallagher, after a gig he'd seen with him playing. That goes into an AC30, and that really is it. That's all you need. You will get the Queen sound pretty well spot on with those. Now, you do need to set these things up, and that's pretty straightforward. What you do: guitar, into treble booster, into AC30. Turn the AC30 up full volume and turn every other control knob down to 0. You will start to hear this snowstorm, and you know you're in the right ballpark. I would say, however, that an AC30 at full volume is not really practical for home use, so I would recommend the use of an attenuator. My own personal choice would be the Marshall PB100. There are other, more practical solutions to home use, and there are some new amps coming out that we'd like to talk about on the show as they become available. And in each episode, we're going to listen to some feedback. If you have any more feedback, if you'd like to get in touch with us to talk about being on the show, if there's parts of the show you did like, if there's parts of the show you didn't like, I'd love to hear from you. So please email redspecialpodcast@gmail.com. I'd also like to mention Brian May on the Red Special Guitar Podcast campaign I've launched today. This is something I'm going to talk about every week until we manage to get Dr. May on the podcast. So if anyone does know him, knows how to get to him, knows a way around getting him on the podcast with a guitar, I'd love to hear from you. So again, please email redspecialpodcast@gmail.com. And thanks ever so much for listening today. We've got a few more episodes coming out soon, some really exciting stuff in the pipeline, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you like the show, please hit subscribe. And more importantly, keep safe and catch you in the next one.